Right, so one down, two more to go, and boy have we got some work to catch up on. So in the last video we had Rey discovering Luke on a mountaintop in some ruins, Finn overcame his stormtrooper programming and joined Finn and Leia in the not quite blown up yet Republic, Kylo Ren used his lightsaber to cook an instant kebab on his dad, and we got the reveal of a quadruple-sized turbo planet destroyer getting ready for field testing by the First Order. If you want any more specifics, go ahead and click on the little eye in the corner of the screen. That'll give you all the information that you need. I strongly urge you to watch that video first before continuing with this one, otherwise half of what I say here will make no sense to you. With that being said, let's crack on with rewriting what might very well be the most divisive edition of the Star Wars series. So starting off, I would actually begin with a little flashback of sorts, kind of like the opening to the Two Towers. Luke sees the destruction of his Jedi temple, the killing of his students, the transformation of Ben Solo into Kylo Ren. He also gets flashes of other visions, such as Kylo Ren and his allies, the Knights of Ren, kneeling before Supreme Leader Snoke and the members of his Dark Council. We also hear Snoke's voice telling Kylo Ren that he must kill the past in order to become great, and he gets one final vision of Han Solo getting stabbed by Kylo Ren, and then suddenly Luke wakes up panting and sweating from his nightmare. Now personally, I'm a little bit sick of movies opening up with flashbacks like this, but here I think it would work, because seeing the struggle of Luke Skywalker, both losing his faith in what he believes in and eventually recovering it, should be one of the primary focuses of this movie. But more on that later. Luke wakes up from his nightmare, and we spend the next few minutes seeing the kind of life that he's been living in these ancient ruins that we saw at the end of the last film. Maybe he's getting water from a well, hunting animals in the wild, you know, living that minimal hunter-gatherer lifestyle. From this opening, we see just how far Luke has fallen thanks to his failure with Ben Solo. He's trying to go backwards, living a humble life not unlike his childhood growing up on Tatooine. His failure was so immense that he doesn't trust himself to keep on using the Force. He knows his time has passed, someone new must come to take up his mantle. And speaking of which, Rey then shows up at the temple, leading into the ending of the last film. Luke is sitting there on a hilltop, meditating, and then Rey comes and interrupts him. She presents his old lightsaber, he recognizes it, takes it, doesn't quite lob it away like a frisbee, like he did in Last Jedi, but instead asks Rey how she came by the weapon. She explains her story thus far and states that she seeks to learn the ways of the Jedi, and this is an immediate turn-off for Luke, who tells her that she won't find what she seeks here, not from him anyway. Rey, of course, is a bit confused. She imagined that Luke was going to train her in the ways of the Force just as Obi-Wan and Yoda trained him, and he replies with a witty rejoinder saying that the ways of the Force and the ways of the Jedi are very different things, and that if she wants him to train her, she has to decide which one she is really seeking. But moving away from them for a minute, we see Finn, Poe, and Leia working together to marshal the Republic forces in preparation for the First Order's imminent assault. Remember, Starkiller Base hasn't been destroyed yet. We only found out about its existence at the end of the last film. So now Finn has told them about the existence of this giant death machine, and now they're having to work overtime to prepare for its inevitable attack. The only silver lining to this whole scenario is that Starkiller Base isn't quite ready for deployment yet. The First Order needs a large deposit of rare crystals, known as Kyber crystals, to actually power the weapon itself. Leia gets word that the First Order are roaming the galaxy, plundering various planets for their resources, and she sends Finn, Poe, and BB-8 to try and delay their efforts as best as they can. Their first stop is the infamous crime-ridden world of Nar Shaddaa to get information about where the First Order is getting their crystals. However, Poe seems to be a little reluctant to go to this planet, and as they get down there and start searching for answers, we find out why. The trio run into a masked criminal called Zori Bliss, who knew Poe when they were younger. She reveals that they used to be partners in a criminal smuggling ring before Poe was captured by the New Republic and given a second chance by none other than Leia Skywalker herself. Maybe she saw his piloting skills firsthand, or sensed through the Force that he had the potential to be something greater than just a lowly criminal. This gives us a good bit of backstory for Poe and shows us how he and Leia forged such a strong connection. She's the reason that he believes so fiercely in the Republic cause, and why he hates the First Order with such a passion. Leia gave a criminal like him a second chance when no one else would, when he felt that he didn't deserve one. But cutting back to the present, Zori and her goons take Poe, Finn, and BB-8 back to her Leia, she reveals that despite her best efforts, her criminal business is struggling to get off the ground. Most of the other criminal syndicates, including her biggest rival, the Hutts, are throwing their lot in with the First Order. One or two of them are even supplying the First Order with kyber crystals to power Starkiller Base, and that if she wants to keep her business going and be successful, she has to start towing the party line as well. She reveals then that she is planning to sell the three of them off to the First Order and basically gain a name for herself. This is when we get a little bit of world building. The First Order isn't just going after the Republic through military might, they're also making contacts with underground syndicates to aid in their efforts and lay the foundations for a network of control throughout the galaxy. Control the criminals, you control the underworld. Control the underworld, and you have yet another asset at your disposal. But cutting away from this dramatic development, we then see Kylo Ren on Starkiller Base, recovering from his wounds from the last film, both physical and psychological. Killing his father hasn't given him the catharsis that he was hoping for. He imagined that killing Han Solo would allow him to fully embrace the dark side, but if anything, he seems to feel himself pulling further away from it. This of course makes Daddy Snoke very unhappy. Kylo speaks to several representatives of the Dark Council, as well as the Supreme Leader's hologram, not the guy himself, because he's being kept in a secure location. More on that later. The Dark Council urges Ren to obey the Supreme Leader, and Snoke tells him that he needs to reignite the dark flame within himself if he hopes to defeat his new rival, that being Rey. To help with this, he meets with other members of the Knights of Ren to retrain and strengthen his resolve in the dark side. You can maybe get a couple of cool interactions between him and his comrades, showing that despite their evil intentions and their allegiance to the First Order and the dark side, they do all share a twisted sense of brotherhood. If anything, these are the only real friends Kylo Ren has. The Knights of Ren all crave power, they crave strength, and their common ideology is what allows them to forge such a strong bond. They aren't just some boss fight to beat at the end of the last movie, they are all characters in their own right. That'd be pretty cool to see expanded in Last Jedi, wouldn't it? You could maybe single out one of the Knights of Ren as a close friend of Kylo and the one that he connects with the most, and he could basically be for Kylo Ren what Wedge Antilles was for Luke. This could also be the first time we get hints of Rey and Kylo Ren's Force connection. The two of them at this point are both at something of a low point, and that shared emotion allows them to connect mentally across the galaxy, even if it's only for an instant. But then cutting back to the temple ruins, Luke reunites with Chewbacca, they share a friendly little back and forth and jointly mourn Han's death, which, remember, Luke sensed through the Force. He voices his reluctance to train Rey as he senses that she is too naive in the ways of the Force to be trained yet, but then he sees something which changes his mind. On the outskirts of the temple, he sees Rey come across a wild desert beast attacking a pack of cubs, and using her connection to the Force, she calms the beast down and saves the smaller pups before riding the beast back into the temple. It's this demonstration which convinces Luke to train her. She's not just demonstrating the kind of raw, untamed power that we saw at the end of the last film, she's showing that she has a decent grasp of both the light and the dark side. She has her feet in both camps, as it were, which is just the kind of thing that Luke was waiting to see. He begins the training by explaining to Rey what the ruins themselves actually are. The original Jedi Temple, the first of the bunch, the place where the original Force users trained. Only back then, they weren't called Jedi or Sith, and the Force wasn't divided in terms of light and dark. There were no Sith or Jedi, there were just people and the Force. Luke explains that he found the temple when he was researching the Jedi's history in preparation for bringing the Old Order back. He tells the story of Ben Solo and his fall to the dark side, how he was always more aggressive than his peers during training. Luke sensed a thirst for power within him that he hoped he could wean out of the young student, but unable to stop himself, Kylo Ren lashed out in anger and attacked his master, bringing several of the other students to his side and slaughtering those who wouldn't join him. Rey is shocked to learn that Luke doesn't actually want to bring the Jedi back anymore, that he believes his efforts to revive the Old Order ended up creating Kylo Ren in the first place. He then reinforces this philosophy by demonstrating that the mere existence of the Jedi entices the creation of more Sith. Dark comes to meet the light, and rather than finding a balance, these two forces clash indefinitely, killing untold billions in the process. I tried to revive the past, he says, and I succeeded. The past repeated itself, and my new Jedi were wiped out from within by one of their own. That is a tale as old as the Jedi themselves. Rey voices her confusion, and Luke reiterates his point that if she's come seeking the ways of the Jedi, Jedi, he will not train her. But if she seeks to learn the ways of the Force itself, to expand her mind past the simple age-old dichotomy of good versus evil, he will give her a chance. Then back over with Finn, Poe, and BB-8, they are on their way to be turned into the First Order on Nar Shaddaa, and Poe begs his old friend to let them go and help them. She refuses, and right at the last minute, Finn and BB-8 spring into action. BB-8 breaks Finn and Poe's bonds, and they overpower the First Order soldiers, triggering a big firefight. The trio escape along with Poe's old criminal buddy, and they eventually come to a halt just outside a big spaceport. She then turns on them, pointing a blaster their way and stating that she doesn't have any choice. She has to turn them into the First Order now, otherwise she's a dead woman. Poe reasons that the Republic will show her mercy if she comes with them, and she rebuffs him by saying that she is just as afraid of them as the First Order. She's a criminal, an outcast. Whether she sides with the First Order or the Republic, she's still signing her freedom away to one tyrannical government or another. They're all the same to her. She doesn't see much of a distinction between the two sides. Poe disagrees and manages to finally convince her to come with them, even if it's only to escape the First Order troops. They hijack a ship, which belongs to a weapons dealer she knows, and they escape Nar Shaddaa. Now this brings us over to Leia, C-3PO, R2-D2, and Admiral Akbar on Coruscant as they prepare the Republic's forces. Akbar suggests that they evacuate the central planet in case Poe, Finn, and BB-8 fail in their mission, and Leia concedes his point. Thus the evacuation of Coruscant begins. Luke, meanwhile, continues to train Rey. We can maybe get a little montage of her lifting objects with the Force, a little hand-to-hand combat, kind of like Toph training Korra in Avatar. Then we could get a more serious moment when, after a long day, Luke gives her some extra lessons on lightsaber construction, which is one of the most personal actions that any Force user could take. Rey goes into meditation as she begins to construct her own lightsaber with the Force. After intense concentration, she successfully builds her lightsaber, proudly holds it aloft and flicks it on, except nothing happens, because, as Luke points out, it doesn't actually have a kyber crystal. Rey asks him why he didn't just give her a crystal to begin with, and he responds by saying, 1, it was kind of funny, and 2, she needs to seek her own crystal out, not be handed one on a platter. He encourages her to go into a meditation again and open herself up to the Force fully, allowing her to mentally search the planets for the final remaining kyber crystals. This could be a really important scene for several reasons. For one, we can connect it back to the first movie, with Rey seeing visions of losing her older sister and her insane attack against Kylo Ren as she opens herself up to the Force. We're seeing her start to slip into the dark side again, but not fully embracing it. As she delves deeper and deeper into the Force and eventually finds the location of a crystal, Luke pulls her back, his previous fears that she might turn to the dark side resurfacing. But at the same time, he feels something different about her, something that he hadn't felt with Kylo Ren. With him, Darth Vader, and the Emperor, he could feel their bond to the dark side, how much they clung to the power that it offered. With Rey, though, he senses that she isn't quite enthralled to it. She reached out to it, definitely, but she kept enough focus and control to prevent herself from giving fully into it. And this gets to my point about how to make Rey more interesting in this new trilogy. In my opinion, her journey should have been less a simple accept the light side or give in to the dark side, like we've already seen quite a few times in Star Wars, and more her learning to forge her own path and essentially become a grey Jedi, a balance between the light and the dark side. I'd kind of like to have seen her more like Ahsoka from the Clone Wars series, where she learns to move past her black and white view of the Force and embrace a more morally fluid view of things. It would make sense thematically. In the original trilogy, we have Luke moving closer and closer into the light side, then in the prequels, we have Anakin slowly embracing the dark side, and then in the new trilogy, we have Rey finding the middle ground. That's kind of a cool full circle, isn't it? In any case, Luke finds himself unsettled by Rey's means of delving into the Force and goes off to brood, conflicted now whether training her was a really good idea to begin with. Rey, meanwhile, feeling confused and conflicted herself, mentally communes with Kylo Ren, and she reveals that she knows about what he did to Luke's students. He counters by advising her to ask her new master if he's told her the full story. Then, cutting back over to Luke, one scene I thought would be kind of cool would be having him and Leia share a similar mental conversation as Rey and Kylo Ren. Leia communes with Luke when she's at her most frustrated, and they have a nice little back and forth, discussing their respective hardships, discussing what they've been doing for the last little while, and Luke also expresses his uncertainty with training Rey. He doesn't want to create another monster like Kylo Ren. Leia reassures him though that what happened to Ren wasn't his fault, and while she will have to come to terms with the fact that her son may well be a monster now, Luke has to stop blaming himself in order to push forward. Then, cutting back to Starkiller Base, Kylo Ren himself searches through several ancient Sith documents in an effort to explain his sudden retreat from the dark side. To his frustration, they give him very few answers, so in an act of desperation, he turns to a more Jedi-esque solution in his search for understanding. He lapses into a meditative state, something that he hasn't done since turning his back on the Jedi, and experiences a sudden flash of visions from the past. He hears snippets of Luke's final confrontation with Darth Vader and the Emperor on board the Death Star, Anakin screaming his hatred at Obi-Wan, some of his early training sessions with Luke. Then, as he delves further and further into his meditation, he sees none other than the spirit of Anakin Skywalker himself appear before him. And no, he wouldn't be played by Hayden Christensen, that just wouldn't make any sense. I would probably get some older actor to play him, who looks closer to the actor who played him at the end of Return of the Jedi, because that just makes more sense. Kylo Ren drops to one knee, bowing before his grandfather in reverence before the spirit implores him to stand up, kind of like Captain Picard in that one episode of Next Generation.
Please, get up. Get up. You must not kneel to me.
You do not wish it?
I do not deserve it.
They share a few words, maybe have a sweet conversation between the generations, and Kylo Ren asks why Anakin never showed himself before. Why, after all this time worshipping at the helmet of Darth Vader, that the fabled Sith Lord never came to offer him guidance. To which Anakin replies, "You were not speaking to me. You were speaking to Darth Vader, and Darth Vader is long gone from this world." He explains that he was only willing to appear after Kylo Ren considered a solution beyond the dark side. Calmness, balance, meditation, these are the ways of the Jedi, not the Sith, and the fact that Kylo Ren considered doing that is a sign that he's not totally lost to the dark side. There is still hope for him, even after everything that he's done. Kylo Ren argues with the Ghost, affirming that there is no turning back for him, and Anakin counters by saying that he did far worse to far more people when he was alive, and Luke was still able to turn him good. Enraged at this, Kylo Ren yells that he will not abandon everything he's worked for, and the Ghost promptly vanishes. This is a pivotal point for Kylo Ren's character. Everything that he's done up until now, betraying Luke, joining the First Order, killing his father, it was all in service of embracing the dark side and fulfilling his desire for power and knowledge. But now here is his idol, his dark hero, essentially telling him that he's pursuing the wrong path, that everything he's done up until now was wrong. That's obviously going to screw with him a bit. But it goes a little bit deeper than that. This is a huge step for Kylo Ren to let go of the rigid philosophy that he has been clinging to all this time. He's just had his own grandfather that the ways of the Sith will enslave him, that he should let go of his grip on the dark side, and this shakes every fundamental belief that Kylo Ren has formed up to this point. He goes to his allies in the Knights of Ren, then speaks to Snoke's hologram about the development. The Supreme Leader orders him to ignore the old spirit's words and continue with his studies, and he reiterates that the only way for Kylo Ren to regain his lost strength is to let the past die. Kylo Ren obliges, but the seeds of doubt have already been planted in his mind. Then, cutting back to Finn, Poe, BB-8, and now Zorii, they begin to make their way to Dantooine in their mission to stop the First Order from retrieving any more Kyber crystals. Zorii was the one who gave them this information, although she still doesn't trust Poe or his Republic allies. In her own words, she doesn't exactly have much of a choice anymore. Thanks to them, the First Order have branded her a traitor, which means her only hopes of finding a life for herself in a criminal business are well and truly in tatters. Poe and Finn argue that now she can join the Republic and fight for the good guys, but Zorii holds to her belief that the Republic are no more the good guys than the First Order, being every bit as controlling, meddling, and unhelpful as the supposed bad guys. She showcases this by bringing up the inventory for the ship that they stole, and reveals that the weapons dealer who owned it sold weapons to the Republic Republic as well as the First Order. A familiar sounding scene, huh? See, this was one of the things I liked in Last Jedi. I liked that concept that the quote-unquote good guys may not be as clean as we first imagined them. Maybe they have the same criminal dealings as the bad guys. Maybe there are some in the Republic profiting off the war as much as the First Order. These are all points Zori brings up, causing Poe and Finn to question their undying loyalty to the Republic. But getting away from that, they arrive on Dantooine as the First Order are mining the planet for kyber crystals. They infiltrate one of the caverns and find none other than Captain Phasma leading the forces, which triggers a little bit of PTSD for Finn. Remember, she's the one who ruthlessly trained him and essentially brainwashed him into becoming a stormtrooper as a child. He's carrying a lot of psychological scars, and Phasma is the primary source of that. While Finn is eager to take her and the rest of the Imperials down, Poe suggests an alternative. By this point, with the amount of crystals collected, disabling this one mining operation would prove useless in the grand scheme of things. They would be wasting their efforts, but if they stowed away on the Imperial freighters, they could potentially do some real damage to the First Order from behind enemy lines, potentially even destroy Starkiller Base from within. Taking a moment to communicate with Leia, Poe relays his plan to the princess-turned-senator/general, and she orders him to abandon the mission and return to Coruscant to help prepare the defenses and the evacuation. But then, ignoring her orders, and eager to cling to his ideals of heroic sacrifice, Poe lies to Finn by saying that Leia gave them the go-ahead and they enact their plan to infiltrate the First Order freighters. Then, cutting back to Rey, she goes for a walk into the deeper areas of the temple ruins to search for her kyber crystal and discovers a large arena which houses a strong connection to the Force, not unlike the cave on Dagobah. She finds what she's looking for and adds the kyber crystal to her lightsaber, bringing it to life. Then, as she's celebrating, she hears the voices of long-dead Force users training in the cavern. Going into a meditative trance, as Luke had taught her, Rey uses the Force to relive past events and witnesses a terrible battle which happened here, a battle which led to the division of the Ancient Order and the creation of the Jedi and the Sith. She also delves a little bit too deeply into the Force as the visions slowly begin to shift from the first Force users centuries ago through to the rise of the modern Sith Lords, which could make for a nice bit of fan service. We could get flashes of Nar Shaddaa, Freedon Nad, Exar Kun, Darth Bane, all the way up to Darth Vader and Darth Sidious, and finally Kylo Ren. Though suspiciously, there's no Supreme Leader Snoke there, but we'll come to that in a minute. Rey stares down the visage of Kylo Ren, she pulls out her lightsaber, and as she goes to strike him down, he suddenly shifts into the image of Ben Solo unmasked and dressed in the robes of a Jedi Knight. Rey falters, suddenly confused, when she sees that her lightsaber has suddenly turned red. She looks down and sees that she's suddenly dressed in the garb of the Sith. Naturally, this is going to mess with her a little bit. The image of Ben Solo ignites a blue lightsaber and comes towards her, intent on striking her down as the enemy. Confused and terrified, Rey backs away before running into Luke's arms, who snaps her out of the vision. Sensing her terror, he counsels her on what she saw and tells her that the Force only shows us what might be, not what will be. She needn't take this vision as being gospel, as being literal. He tries to reassure her that she need not fall down the same path as Kylo Ren, and this is the point when Rey starts to become a little suspicious. She backs away from the Old Master and reveals that she and Kylo Ren have been speaking through the Force, and demands to know the full story of how he turned to the dark side. She demands that he tell her the full truth, and he obstinately walks away to avoid answering. Enraged, Rey pulls out her custom-built lightsaber and attacks him, and he responds in kind. They have themselves a little mini-duel. Luke is kind of acting a bit more frustrated rather than intimidated by Rey's outburst. The battle continues for a minute or two more before Rey's lightsaber suddenly short-circuits and malfunctions, allowing Luke to quickly disarm her and force push her back. Defeated and still angry, Rey asks what went wrong with her lightsaber, and Luke gives a simple answer. Nothing. You should ask what's wrong with the person who built it. He explains that Rey does have a rare gift, an affinity for both the light and the dark side. What she needs to do is find a balance, not fluctuate from one to the other on a whim. If she can learn that, if she can learn that perfect balance in the way that even Luke was never even able to master, she has the potential to become more powerful than she can even imagine. Calming down, Rey asks one more time what happened with Kylo Ren, and Luke finally gives in and tells the full story.